In the busy streets of New York City, it's not uncommon to see all kinds of people hustling to make a living. But on this particular day, something extraordinary happened that would catch the attention of the entire nation. A young girl, dressed in tattered clothes, stood by the corner, her frail hand holding a small sign that read, "Hungry, please help." She had been standing there for hours, receiving only a few coins and glances of pity from the passing crowd. But she wasn't begging for food anymore. Her focus had shifted to something far more urgent. The sound of tires screeching against the pavement made the people nearby turn their heads. An expensive black SUV, windows tinted, was pulling up to the intersection. The girl, who had been ignored by so many that day, suddenly felt an overwhelming sense of danger. Her eyes widened, and without a second thought, she sprinted toward the vehicle. "Don't drive!" she shouted at the top of her lungs, her voice cutting through the noise of the bustling city. The crowd froze, unsure of what was happening, as the girl stood in the middle of the street, directly in front of the SUV. For a brief moment, time seemed to stop as everyone held their breath. The driver, confused, hit the brakes, the car jolting to a stop just inches from her. Inside the vehicle sat none other than Melania Trump, the former First Lady of the United States, known for her poise and grace. She had planned to go unnoticed in the city that day, away from the cameras and public eye. But now, with this young girl blocking her path, Melania's calm demeanor started to crack. Something was wrong, and she knew it. The bystanders, unsure whether this was some kind of protest or a random act of desperation, began whispering amongst themselves. Phones came out, cameras started rolling, and before anyone could fully grasp the situation, the police were on their way. The girl, still panting from her mad dash, refused to move. "Don't let them drive away," she repeated, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. Melania, seated in the back, exchanged nervous glances with her driver. Why was this girl so desperate to stop them? Was there something wrong with the car? A few moments later, the police arrived. Officers rushed to the scene, quickly assessing the situation. But the girl's refusal to move only heightened the tension. "What's going on here?" one officer asked, trying to keep the crowd back. She's trying to stop us from leaving," the driver stammered, unsure how to explain what had just happened. The officer turned to the girl, crouching down to meet her gaze. "Why did you run in front of the car? Are you in trouble?" The girl's voice cracked as she responded, "There's something in the car. You need to check it. Please." A hushed murmur spread through the onlookers. Something in the car. What could she mean? The officer exchanged a glance with his partner, who motioned for the driver to step out. They were going to check the vehicle, just to be safe. Inside, Melania sat frozen, her hands resting tensely in her lap. What was about to happen? She had no idea why this girl was so frantic, but a pit formed in her stomach. The police officers approached the vehicle cautiously. One reached for the door handle, while the other kept a close eye on the girl, whose wide eyes followed every movement. The tension in the air was palpable, as if everyone in the crowd was collectively holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. As the door swung open, the officer stepped inside to inspect the interior. For a few moments, everything was quiet, too quiet. The crowd grew restless, whispering among themselves, and even Melania's driver seemed uneasy. What had they missed? What was hiding in the shadows of that car? The girl, still standing in the street, watched in silence. She knew something was coming. Everyone did. The question was, what would they find? And just as the officer's hand reached under the seat, his eyes widened with shock. What they discovered left everyone stunned. The officer's hand trembled. slightly, as he pulled out a small, unmarked black box from under the seat. It was sleek, almost too ordinary, but there was something about it that didn't sit right with him. He glanced at his partner, who now stood at the side of the vehicle, her eyes wide with concern. The crowd, still held back by police tape, leaned in with bated breath, as if they knew they were on the verge of witnessing something monumental. Melania Trump, sitting stiffly in the back seat, felt her heart racing. She had no idea what this box was, or how it had ended up in her car. Her mind scrambled for answers, trying to recall if anything unusual had happened that day. But all she could focus on now was the little girl, still standing just a few feet away, her gaze fixed on the officers, as if she had known this moment would come. "Step back!" the officer barked, suddenly tense. His partner nodded and motioned for Melania's driver to stay where he was. The girl's warning echoed in his mind. There's something in the car, and now, holding this mysterious box, he couldn't shake the feeling that something far bigger was at play. The officer carefully opened the box, his breath catching as he peered inside. It was filled with what appeared to be detailed schematics, diagrams of various routes through the city, including high-profile locations. But that wasn't all. There was also a small electronic device, wires connected to what looked like a tracking system. This was no random item left behind. This was deliberate. He radioed in immediately, his voice low but urgent. "We've got something here. Get a specialist on the scene." His words sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. The cameras that had been rolling from a distance zoomed in, trying to capture every moment. People whispered furiously, speculating about what could possibly be going on. Meanwhile, the girl, who had been silent up to this point, finally spoke again. "I saw them put it in there. They didn't think I'd notice, but I did." Her voice was steady, but there was a hint of fear behind her words. She turned to the officer closest to her, her eyes pleading. "You have to believe me. I'm telling the truth." The officer narrowed his gaze, clearly torn between skepticism and concern. Who put it there?" The girl hesitated for a moment, glancing at Melania, who was now watching her closely, her face a mix of confusion and disbelief. "I don't know who they are," she finally said, "but I saw them. They did it when the car was parked at the corner, just before she got in." Melania's mind raced. Who would have had access to her vehicle? She had been surrounded by security the entire day, but as she thought about it more, her stomach dropped. There had been a brief moment when the car was left unattended while she was inside a building. Could it have happened then? And why would anyone target her? The officers were now working quickly, communicating with specialists, trying to figure out the next steps. But for Melania, the questions kept piling up. Was this a political move? An attempt to sabotage her? Or worse, frame her for something? And then there was the girl, this mysterious, street-smart kid who had risked everything to stop the car from driving away. How did she know all of this? And why had she chosen to get involved? As the tension mounted, the police began to cordon off a wider area around the vehicle. Bomb squad units were called in, and the situation escalated from strange to potentially dangerous. Melania's heart pounded as they guided her away from the car, toward the safety of a nearby building. But her mind stayed on the girl, her clothes ragged, her face dirty, yet her eyes filled with a wisdom far beyond her years. The officers questioned her further, trying to piece together the events leading up to this moment. "You need to tell us everything you saw," one of them said firmly. "Every detail matters." The girl nodded, looking down for a second, before she began speaking again. "I don't live far from here. I've been on the streets for a while now. I see things that people don't think I notice. I was sitting by the building when I saw a group of men standing by the car. They weren't supposed to be there, but no one seemed to notice. They opened the door, slipped that box under the seat, and then left quickly. The officer listened carefully, jotting down notes. "And you're sure they didn't see you?" The girl shook her head. "No, I'm sure of it. I hid behind the dumpster. They never saw me." She paused, her hands shaking slightly. "I didn't know what it was at first, but when I saw her getting into the car, I knew something bad was going to happen." The officers exchanged a glance. This wasn't just a random act of vandalism. There was something much deeper at play, and they needed to figure it out fast. But as they processed what the girl had said, another question arose. Who were the men she had seen? And why had they planted that box in Melania Trump's car? The city buzzed with speculation. Reporters flocked to the scene, eager to break the story. The tension in the air was thick, and the police worked quickly to neutralize any potential threat. But with every passing minute, the mystery only deepened. As the bomb squad moved closer to the SUV, Melania watched from a distance, her nerves on edge. She wasn't just scared for herself anymore. There was something far bigger at stake, something she couldn't yet understand. And just when it seemed like they were about to get answers, a loud crack echoed through the air, a noise that sent shockwaves through the crowd. The officers jolted, and everyone braced for the worst. But the real danger hadn't even begun to reveal itself yet. The sharp crack that echoed through the air felt like a bolt of electricity surging through the crowd. People gasped and ducked, instinctively bracing themselves. The officers immediately looked toward the SUV, their hands reaching for their radios. But nothing appeared to be out of place. The bomb squad continued their work, carefully dismantling the strange device from the black box, unaware of what had just happened. Melania Trump stood frozen, her eyes darting from the officers to the bomb squad. Her pulse quickened. She wasn't sure what to fear more, the mystery surrounding the device or the unknown dangers that might still be lurking in the shadows. But just as quickly as the panic had surged through the crowd, it began to settle. The officers moved swiftly to investigate the source of the noise. But nothing seemed amiss. Then, a figure stepped forward from the far side of the crowd, a man, dressed in an oversized hoodie, his face partially obscured by the shadows of the tall buildings. He walked with purpose, his movements too deliberate to be a passerby. The officers noticed him almost immediately, drawing closer, their hands hovering near their weapons. The crowd shifted, unsure of what was about to unfold. The man's eyes locked onto the girl, the one who had thrown herself in front of the car, the one who had stopped everything. A sense of dread crept into the air as the girl took a small step back, her body language stiffening. She recognized him. Everyone could see it in her eyes. "That's him," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The officers turned their attention to her, following her gaze to the man. "He's the one. He was with them when they put the box in the car." Everything clicked into place. The man had returned to see if his plan had worked, to watch from the sidelines as chaos unfolded. But the girl had thrown a wrench in it all, and now he knew she had seen him. The tension grew thicker as the officers moved toward him, their voices stern as they ordered him to stop. The man hesitated for a brief moment before turning to run, but the officers were faster. Within seconds, they had him pinned to the ground, handcuffs clinking around his wrists. The crowd erupted into murmurs of relief and curiosity, while the girl stood silently, watching it all unfold. She had been right all along. As the man was led away, the officers returned to the SUV, now confident they had control over the situation. The bomb squad gave the all clear, confirming that the device in the car had been neutralized. It wasn't an explosive, but a tracking system. likely part of a larger, more sinister plot. The box was designed to trace every move the car made, and Melania, unknowingly, had been the target of it all. Melania Trump, still shaken but grateful, approached the girl, her expression softening. She had no idea how close she had come to being part of something dangerous, and this young girl had saved her from it. "Thank you," Melania said quietly, her voice filled with genuine emotion. "You saved my life today. I don't know how I can ever repay you." The girl, who had spent so much of her life being ignored and overlooked, finally felt seen. For the first time in what felt like forever, someone was listening to her, believing her. She looked up at Melania, a small hesitant smile forming on her lips. "I just did what anyone would do," she said softly, though deep down she knew not. Everyone would have risked what she did. The police finished their investigation, piecing together the man's role in what seemed to be part of a larger scheme. It became clear that he wasn't acting alone, and authorities were already chasing down leads. Whatever they had planned for Melania had been cut short, thanks to the quick thinking of a girl who refused to be ignored. As the crowd began to disperse, the tension that had hung over the scene finally lifted. The police took statements, reporters buzzed with excitement, and Melania, still processing everything, walked with the officers back to her now secure vehicle. But before she left, she turned back to the girl one more time. "What's your name?" she asked, her tone soft and sincere. The girl hesitated, as if she hadn't been asked that question in a long time. "Emily," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Emily," Melania repeated, nodding. "You've done something truly brave today." Emily watched as Melania's SUV finally pulled away, knowing that her life had changed in ways she hadn't expected. She hadn't set out that morning to be a hero, but somehow, in the chaos of it all, she had become one. And now, as the streets of New York returned to their usual rhythm, Emily realized that even though she had been invisible for so long, today she had made a difference. As she walked away from the scene, Emily glanced back one last time, a quiet sense of pride swelling in her chest. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful.